Welcome to Big Blend Radio, where we celebrate variety and how it adds spice to quality of life. Welcome, everyone, to today's Big Blend Daily Show, or our Big Daily Blend Show, but it's also part of our Women Making History podcast and also our Toast to the Art show. You know, March is Women's History Month, and it is also Reading Month, National Reading Month, which is cool. And today, March 2nd, is Read Across America Month. So, you know what's happening on today's show. We are chatting with women authors, and we're also going to talk about women authors that inspire us. At the end of the show, we're going to close with Glenn Burrows, who owns Norfolk Tours in England, who talks about some famous women authors in England, and also travel writer Sharon K. Kurtz gives a shout out to one of her favorite authors. But of course, you know, when it's the first Sunday of the month, we have award-winning singer-songwriter Johnny Schaefer here. You can keep up with him at hearjohnny.com. He is our co-host. So welcome back, Johnny. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you, Lisa, and I'm really excited about this subject today because when I think about my life, women have been the bigger influence on me, I think. Most of my teachers were women all through school, and many of my favorite musicians are women, many of my favorite authors. And, you know, to have three of them who are also friends on the show today is really exciting for me as well. And I love the other guests that we have as well. So I'm very excited about today's show.
Yeah, we are too. You know, in this show, we started it off and I had to break it up into different shows. So everyone, on Monday, you'll also hear the Tucson Sisters in Crime podcast. We just had a lot of women authors that said, oh, we want to be part of this. And I'm like, yeah, we can't turn anybody down. Are you kidding me? Because they all rock. All of the women on the shows rock. And so we have the Tucson Sisters in Crime. And we have some more women authors that we're going to be featuring throughout the month. So stay tuned for that, including also Barbara Southard will be on also on Monday. And she wrote the novel. It's a historical fiction novel with some truth in there called Unruly Human Heart. So stay tuned for that. That will be in her story. Actually, it's wild. You have to listen to the podcast. All I can say is it is focused on the historically famous Beecher Tilton adultery trial, where Theodore Tilton, his wife Elizabeth Tilton, and Reverend Henry Ward Beecher are exposed for their extramarital affairs, embodying the new 19th century concept of free love. How about that? So, hey. But let's celebrate Women's History Month. Well, this was part of women's liberation too. And so, very excited about tomorrow's shows and today. So I think let's start off, Johnny. You invited some wonderful women on the show. And let's start off with Shirley Skufka Hickman. You can find her books on Amazon, and everyone's links are in the episode notes. So, Johnny, before we bring Shirley on, you want to give a little backstory, because I think she lived in Porterville or lives in Porterville, which is your backyard when you were a kid?
Yes, Shirley lives in Porterville and taught at Wenatchee High School, where I went and my brothers went. And my brother Mike is a high school social studies and history teacher up in Olympia, Washington, and he credits Shirley with the reason that he went into teaching. He was so inspired by her and loved her so much. And she's everybody I talk to from high school, she's either their favorite or one of their favorite teachers, and such a love for teaching and love for language and for the English language and for writing. And so many of us learned much of what we know about writing from Shirley. And she also, a side note, she was the choreographer in several of the musicals that I was in high school. So I also got to enjoy her that way. And she has written, I think, 9 books, Shirley? Or 10 books. Okay. Yes. And they're wonderful. Several of them are autobiographical. And then several are also very, very timely. I mean, she focuses on the immigrant community because, of course, in Porterville, the immigrant community is a big part of life there. And so she has wonderful books that she's written she brings personal stories into it that make you see, and I think that's part of the problem is we don't see each other as human beings these days a lot of times, and surely puts a face and a name and makes people real and helps you to learn a lot about people that aren't maybe that don't look like you. And so surely I don't know what specifically you want to focus on in your books, but I know that those are some qualities that I really enjoy in your books.
Welcome, Shirley.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Shirley,
would you like to know?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, because you also came over here, right, from Croatia, your grandparents. So your family, not your grandparents. I thought.
No, my grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
Two of my grandparents came from Croatia,
mm-hmm.
and two of them came from Slovenia. So yes, I understand the immigrant background experience. And I was brought up in a Colorado coal mining town. And I don't know where that was the first time I decided I wanted to be a writer. I was 8 years old, and I loved reading. And it was during World War II. And I said to myself, I have to remember everything that's happened because someday I'm going to write a book. And I did. And that was the first book that I ever wrote. And the title is Don't Give Up, which from my grandmother, who did not speak English that well, when we said something was too hard or we didn't want to do it, she'd shake her finger at us and she'd say, don't give up. And that could have been the theme for World War II because our country did not give up.
Wow. I love that. I love that. I want to bring our next guest on, and we're going to dig into everyone's books and writing, and go through it because I know you've written a number of memoirs, and I love, the story of your grandparents coming over from Croatia, and the fact also, Colorado with the coal mining town. Colorado's history is intense, man. And the women from Colorado are tough. Don't mess with a Colorado woman.
Boy.
Don't do it. But I want to go over to Gayla Turner is our next author guest that Johnny brought on a show. Was it a year ago? I don't know. We were in Indianapolis. That's all I remember. We were in Indiana. I think it was 2 years ago. And Gayla Turner, you can go to her website, gaylaturner.com, again, linked in the episode notes. And what a story. And Johnny, you connected with her and also wrote the theme song for her audiobook, right? So is that how you first met Gayla? Tell everyone how you connected with her.
No, Gayla and I have known each other for many years. We started out working together at a credit union and just became really good friends through that. And then we had the common interest in music, particularly Melissa Manchester. We were both huge Melissa Manchester fans. And so we used to spend a lot of time, talking about that. And then, I'm gay and Gayla is a lesbian. So we also connected that way. There are a lot of common issues that we united around, same-sex marriage and other ways that we're trying to become get equal rights. And so on that level, we became friends, and then also through spirituality. So we have a lot of things in common. And when Gayla discovered these photos in her mother's closet that revealed a love story between her grandmother and another woman in a Bohemian community in rural Wisconsin 100 years ago, it was really beautiful to see how that evolved for her and how it resulted in her writing this beautiful book, Don't You Dare. So real excited to have you back on, Gayla.
Oh, it's so, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Johnny, and thank you, Lisa, for having me back. I'm excited. We feel very humbled by the talented women that are on this episode, and I feel a little intimidated because it was really, I had no inkling of writing a book until I turned 50. So up to that point, I was thinking I'm going to just kind of go through my life in banking, and I was good. But the universe works its ways, and it works its magic to where I kind of went into that direction, and I'm so thankful I did.
I love this because it's quite a story. I mean, it's empowering, isn't it? Your story. I mean,
It
especially,
really is.
yeah, going from the Midwest, and you just give everyone a very brief overview of this story of the book.
Well, my story really started, in 2010, after discovering my grandmother's photos, ironically, in the back of my mother's closet. And finding out at that point,
everything has to come out of the closet for some reason.
It really does, and it's such an apropos. It's so fitting, but it's so cliche. But I even have the photos right now in my own personal closet until I donate them to Wisconsin University. That's where they'll be until I can get them donated. But it just really was empowering to find out that me and my grandmother both love the same way. And up to that point, I thought I was the only queer person in my family. So finding the photos really did empower me to tell this story. And that's kind of what it is. I feel like I'm more of a storyteller than anything else. And that's what's so exciting about the process.
I love that. We're going to get to Elizabeth too, Johnny, and I want to just bring Linda BALLOU on. Linda BALLOU is an author, a travel writer, and has traveled all over the world and across the country and lived in Alaska and Southern California. She has a podcast with us that you can hear every third Wednesday at high noon, she says, focusing on her Lost Angel travel adventures. That's one of her websites, lostangeladventures.com. She writes travel stories and books, like guidebooks as well. And then she's also written fiction novels, which you can learn more at lindaballouauthor.com. But stories of love is why I wanted to bring her in here on this right now, because part of, I think, what led her travels and her writing started with a love story, right? Linda, welcome back.
Hi, Lisa.
Hey.
Yeah, thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah. Didn't your writing and your travels kind of start with a love story with your dad saying, that's it, pack up, you can't be playing with this boy?
You're talking about, my most recent travel collection, Lost Angel Unleashed, begins with memoir, and that back in my traumatic teens, when my dad decided to put me on a bush plane and send me off in a storm and off into the world. And so that was sort of my beginnings as an adventure travel writer, because I turned what was a very negative experience into a really wonderful, exciting one. But my books are about women that I feel have been overlooked in history. Isabella Bird is a Victorian age explorer, another adventure junkie, who lifted herself from the invalid's bed at 40 years of age and started a whole new wonderful life, and went on to, she decided to go on a sea voyage, and there was a storm, and it landed her in the Hawaiian Islands. And she was supposed to only be there 6 days, but she ended up being there for 6 months because she had a transformative experience there that healed her very frail body. But she had such a fierce spirit that she galloped all over the Hawaiian Islands at a time when, the natives were still living in little huts and things. And, she wrote, incredible descriptive passages about the places that she traveled in. And I used her books as research for novels, for another novel that I was writing, but I ended up writing her life, which was so incredible. And I wrote it in first person, which was really nervy. And some people have taken umbrage with that. But others, like the BBC, liked my book, and they put me in a documentary about Isabella Bird. So you never know where these things are going to take you.
Yeah, well, I love this because I think it connects to Shirley being up in Crested Butte, right up in the coal mining town in Colorado. So I was wondering if Isabella ever got up to your area, Shirley. I don't know if you heard about her ever going up in your region by any chance. I don't know.
I don't think so.
Well, see, that's
Yeah,
interesting because when I went to Colorado, I ran into Isabella Bird again. And she wrote a book, A Lady's Life in the Rocky Mountains. And part of her explorations was going into the Rocky Mountains outside of Estes Park. And she is a legend there and considered to be the mother of the Rocky Mountain National Park because her writings were so incredibly beautiful and inspirational that it drew thousands of tourists to the Rocky Mountain National, before it was a park, to the Rocky Mountains. And so it was interesting to me when I was in Estes Park that I asked a few shopkeepers, did you know about Isabel? No, I didn't. But, people who were in the library, and they had a whole celebration, like about in 2022, they had a huge celebration for Isabella. But she's been forgotten by most people, even Coloradans. And so I've enjoyed bringing her to life.
That's awesome. And Shirley, I think your area was more by the Black Canyon of Gunnison, right? Where you were.
It was Crested Butte and Gunnison. Those are the two towns that we lived in. And Crested Butte was a coal mining town. But after the mine closed at the end of World War II, we had to move, and so we moved to Gunnison.
Okay.
And you would think only 30. I don't know if you want me to continue with this or.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Anyway, what happened in our family was we lived in Crested Butte, which was immigrants, Catholic, very democratic, union people. We moved to Gunnison, only a few miles away, to a town that was Protestant. People lived on their ranches for generations. They were Republican. And it was shock. It was shock value.
Wow.
Because the end of the war, there was a very, very difficult time getting housing. So our family of 5 lived in an apartment which had been a one-car garage. There was a small bedroom, a tiny bathroom, and a kitchen. So my 2 sisters and I slept in a double bed in the kitchen.
Wow.
And there was a lot of things that happened there which I didn't understand. I didn't understand, for example, what lunch was. And dinner was at noon. For people in Gunnison, it was our evening meal in Crested Butte. And again, I was so unaware of so many, many things. But the best thing that happened was Gunnison had a college. My father went to the 6th grade. My mother went to the 8th. And that was all that they were allowed to do. But they were both brilliant people. The reason my mother only went to the 8th grade is because there was no high school in Crested Butte. My father, by the time he was in the 6th grade, was very tall and very masculine. And his father said to him, "You look like a man, you work like a man. Leave school, and I'm going to put you in the mine to help support the family."
Wow.
But he was also a very brutal man. And so my dad left home and was on his own, making his way through the world, and didn't come back to see his family until after he married my mom.
Well, everyone, that is your first memoir, right? The Don't Be Give Up.
No.
Okay.
Don't Be Give Up is the first memoir. What I've told you about Gunnison is called Is Everybody Happy Now?
Okay.
Because under these dire circumstances, my father would try to do something. For example, we were in the kitchen, so the coal stove had to be used to fix our food, and it was horribly hot when we slept there at night. So my dad went and bought a hot plate so we could cook on it. And then he would say, "Is everybody happy now?" And anytime anything would occur that my father would do, he would ask the question, "Is everybody happy now?" And we actually moved into a house that had 2 bedrooms much later.
Wow. Well, that's, those upbringings, I think people forget about. And, I think this is the power of the pen, is to bring those stories to life. So, it goes kind of with your gratitude group on Facebook, Johnny, to look at what do we have instead of not what don't we have, I want to bring our next guest on, Elizabeth Massey. She is up the road from where we are right now. We're in Burnsville, North Carolina, just outside Asheville in the mountains. Actually, we're in the Pisgah National Forest. And so I think she shares some of that wonderful, beautiful terrain as we do where we are right now. Elizabeth, she writes some horror stuff. I mean, I was reading through what she's written and I'm like, I'm a little scared of you, Elizabeth. But Johnny, how did you connect with this horror story writer? Because she looks so sweet.
Well, you just mentioned the Gratitude Club, and I believe that's where I remember first, connecting with her, and then we became friends on Facebook, and I just was enamored of so many of her posts. She just has a zest for life and posts about so many different kinds of things. A lot of times I think Lisa, you would appreciate, she'll post really cute animals or insects and say, honey, like this is a honey squirrel or whatever. And it's really cute. And then she had these beautiful, night benedictions that she would post on Facebook that so many of us looked forward to reading. It's just a beautiful way to finish your day. And she ended up publishing those in a book. And then one time she posted a Christmas poem and it was just lovely. And I reached out and said, hey, what would you think? Could I try putting this to music? And it became my song, our song, all the Babes on Christmas Born. And that's on my From Here to Nativity Christmas album. And there's a beautiful lyric video that Elizabeth, gave us photos for, as well as another music video. And it was we've never met, but we wrote a song together, and it's a really lovely experience. And I've read several of her books, and they're wonderful. And couldn't she was one of the first people I thought of for this show, because she not only writes horror, but she writes in many genres, and she can tell you more about that. So welcome, Elizabeth.
You're welcome. I mean, I'm sorry, all these beautiful things Johnny is saying, and then she writes horror. She's going to kill you off, But I believe you're connected with Gayla's book, right?
Yeah, an introduction. It was so powerful and so inspirational to anybody. You think about anybody's situation and you go, all you need to do is do. And it's a brilliant book, and I can't say enough. But I know our time is limited, but everybody should get it and read it. And I also wanted to say I am not a tough Colorado woman. I'm just a delicate Virginia flower who writes all right. But I also write all sorts of things. I write mainstream. I've written historical fiction. I've done a lot of media tie-ins, like The Tudors and Dark Shadows and Buffy the Vampire Slayer, a whole bunch of stuff. And poetry, and I do. My span is pretty wide.
How many books have you? Because you've won so many awards for your books as well. And everyone, the link, go to Amazon and type in Elizabeth Massey, and that's Massie. I'm just letting her know that I do not spell her name. But if you type it in on Amazon, go look. I mean, there's so many books and so many awards. I mean, this is impressive what you've done. How many are we at right now? Because you were honored with the 2023 Horror Writers Association Lifetime Achievement Award. So look how sweet she sounds, everybody. Like, seriously. But yeah, how many books are you at?
As to books, I think it's 36.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
I'd have to go back and count. And that doesn't count short fiction. I have lots and lots of stories in magazines and anthologies. I have no idea how many that is. But yeah, I've been doing this full time since '94. And it's a lot of work, but it's a whole lot of fun.
But you've also done a lot for Amnesty International and nonprofits, a lot of that kind of work. How did that come into play for you?
Well, I guess people say, oh, why do you write horror? It's such a horrible thing to write. In fact, I was at a book signing one time, and a lady actually came up to me and said, why do you do this? We have enough horror in the world. And it's like, well, have you read any of my books, first of all?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't do horror for horror's sake. I do horror so people can see what other people might go through and how characters might deal with it.
Yes.
I mean, when I was a little kid and I watched Twilight Zone and Outer Limits, my parents were very liberal, and they scared me, but they also made me so sad for the characters. And I think that's what came together for me. The fear, and then the feeling sorry for these people that have to deal with this stuff. And so I wanted to create stories like that, that the characters would either shine or they would try to shine through the case, through the situation. But as to amnesty, that kind of ties right in. You think about people and what they're going through, and you want to do something for it. You don't want to just say, oh, that's terrible. You want to do something. And so I've been, involved in that for many, many years.
Yeah, 35 something years. And that's the thing. I think you're balancing the dark and the light. And there's always something in the shadows. Just saying.
Absolutely. That's so true.
There is. I want to bring our next guest on, Erin Youngless, who I think we met when we first started podcasting. I think it was the same year as Twitter came on board 18 years ago. Yeah. And we met on Twitter, Erin. I know, or X or whatever it is now. I'm not going
Twitter. It was Twitter then.
There's Blue Sky now, people. Just saying.
I'm there. Are you on there? I'll find you.
I am. Oh, I'm going to find you. How did I not do that? Like first thing. But, Erin and I've been talking for 18 years.
It's crazy.
And I remember I knew you when you were in Cleveland, Ohio, and made your move over to California. So you're in Linda's backyard, Linda BALLOU, and you are in the same area. And during the fires, I was worried about you both, and also Johnny's in Pasadena. So you guys are all in that same area. And so it was very weird. And Gayla, you're in California too, right? In not San Diego, where
I'm
are
over
you?
in South Pasadena, which is pretty close to Johnny. Yeah.
All right. So you guys all went through so much, and reading a horror book during that kind of time could help. I don't know, just for some humor too, but I met you first as, I know you do yoga, writing, and you came on a show with the anthology that you were in. And so tell everybody, you're also a genealogist. Erin knows how to dig up dirt on people in your family, and good stuff too. Good stuff. There's a lot of good stuff in genealogy. Stuff. But I think it was the Made in LA anthology you came on the first time you came on a show, right?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
It's been a while.
Yeah. So you've done a lot, and you help writers too, right?
I do writing. I'm a writing coach, and I teach. Well, I've just started teaching classes on using genealogical research to write historical fiction and creative nonfiction, and how to marry those two together. I also write horror. So Elizabeth, everything you're saying, you're on the same page as me. I agree. That people say the same thing, that they'll say, oh, you're a yoga teacher. I can't believe you write horror. I'm like, well, have you read my stories? I mean, it's the same. I feel like you need to read it to understand it. I'm not writing gore. It's something completely different.
And you've in a lot of short story books, right? Anthologies, those kinds of things. And then at the same time, you started also writing for film, right?
I've written a couple short screenplays, but they're just kind of sitting there. I am actually editing a historical fiction novel that I wrote about, it's set around the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire in 1911, which was the biggest disaster, human count wise, up until September 11th. So the amount of people who died in the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, was not,
Where did that happen?
Where did the fire happen?
Uh-huh.
It happened in the Asher Building, which is right next to NYU. The Triangle had their factory on the 8th, 9th, and 10th floor. And on the 8th floor, they're not sure. Somebody dropped a lit mat or like a a match or a cigar into a bucket and it caught fire. And in the next 15 minutes, it spread so quickly that over 125 people died.
Wow.
Some from asphyxiation, some from they were so scared that they thought the only option they had was to leap out of the windows.
Wow.
Yes. And it was crazy because the building, the Asha building, was advertised as a fireproof building, which it was. But the Triangle factory was just had over 200 tons of scraps of fabric just sitting there. So when the fire started, there was just no way to stop it. And the fire department wasn't equipped for it. The ladder didn't make it up that high. The fire escapes couldn't hold. They collapsed halfway through. So the book that I wrote and that I'm editing is, it talks about the garment strikes. It talks about Tammany Hall and how they weren't very helpful for the suffragists and the strikers who were trying to get the 50-hour work week and be paid actually well. And then the climax is the fire.
Wow. Amazing. Like, I think we forget this history, and it's so important to put history in the forefront, all of it, yes. Modern history and way back when history, because it can go away very quickly. And history is part of our lessons in life, and I yes. think it's so important to do that. And I love what you do in genealogy as well. Everyone, Erin's website is asyounglissauthor.com. Again, linked in the episode notes, and also genealogybyErin.com, because, I got to promote her genealogy work because it's super cool too. So I wanted to go around and do a champagne toast to an author or a woman that has inspired you, that has something to do with writing. I know, Linda, you went off on Isabella Bird, which we know how much you love her, and it is written. She's written the book again. It's called Embrace of the Wild. It's something to look out there. So I wanted to say, who are you going to toast to? Do you have someone other than Isabella Bird?
Yes, I do. I actually do, because I was, thinking about this show and who really impacted me. And I'll tell you who it is. It's a woman named Burl Markham. And she wrote a book, West into the Night. And she lived in East Africa when it was in the colonization days. And she was just a wild thing. She went there when she was 4, and she, grew up with the native people, the African people, and she had this bravery about her. And she first made point, her life was very exciting as a horse trainer and racetrack. And then she became the first woman bush pilot there in Africa. And she circled around for wild game and so on. And, she had a very, very, very bold and courageous life. And there was a wonderful documentary called World Without Walls that I found on YouTube that was filmed in 1985 when she was still alive. 1985. She died in 1986. She was doing these things in the 20s and the 30s. And at one point, she went to London. She had married 3 times. She was a very, very bold woman and independent. So her marriages didn't last, because in those days, women were supposed to get married and have kids. So she got a plane. She was sponsored by a wealthy man. And she was the first one to fly against the headwinds from London to America. Now, you all may know of this woman. I don't know. But her book languished for 4 decades. When she first published it, it didn't get any juice. 4 decades later, Ernest Hemingway read her book, said it was the best memoir he'd ever read.
Wow.
I'm reading it again now for the second time. It is so beautiful. Her language, her descriptions, her life is so inspirational. I'm not going to be writing about her. Many books have been written about her. Circling the Sun is one that's the best, and it was written in first person, which is where I got the idea of writing Isabella Bird's story in first person. So, yes, Burl Markham is my woman to behold today.
I have a story about her. So, Nancy and I lived in Kenya for a number of years, and I grew up there, and that name rang a bell. And this December, Nancy and I were traveling around doing some park stuff in Phoenix, and it was an evening time, and our dear friend, Rondi, calls us up, and we were watching Fox, as she calls us, right? Two fox, gray fox. And anyway, so Rondi lived and worked outside of Kruger National Park, and her husband is a game ranger. And we swear we met each other before we know each other now, and met each other, and we're dear friends. And I mean, I'm going to say this: Rondi's a badass. I mean, she managed to drive across a river to get to the hospital to birth one of her sons. Like, actually even put her car in the truck into 4-wheel drive to do it. And they're crocodiles, not alligators, crocodiles. Okay. So I'm just going to say that about our friend. And anyway, she calls up and she says she was reading this book that you're talking about, the language. She was rereading this, and she was just like, because we have these conversations about living in Africa, and both of us, Nancy and I and her, like, so the two parties here, lived in the bush and lived bush lives, basically, out in the boonies. And she said, when she had her little store, like a curio shop in Kruger Park, this woman came in, and she was reading that book at the time too. So this is crazy. I can't believe you said this, Linda. And this woman comes walking into the store, and she just looked at her and went, "Who is this?" It's like the queen walks in, but you don't know if it's the queen. And she had this aura about her, and this strength, and this, and I just went and looked at her photo, because she called Nancy and I just to said, "Here's this memory," because we have these Africa chats all the time. And she's like, this woman walked in, bought something, they had a communication, and it was her.
It was Beryl Markham?
Yes.
Wow.
Isn't that not crazy? And we just had this conversation. I had no idea, and I wouldn't have known I wouldn't have known who you were talking about if it wasn't for that conversation.
Oh, really? Well,
Isn't that crazy?
I read her book years ago, but
there's a lot of Markhams out
there. You might start thinking about women that influenced my thinking, and she was one of them. She was way ahead of her time, but unfortunately, she got exploited because she was way ahead of her time. And she was living in poverty. She was out of Africa for about 20 years, and she went back and was training horses again in her late 70s. And she was in poverty, but her book then surfaced, got republished, and then she had money at the very end. And I said, God bless, because she was exploited. Because the times she was living in, women weren't supposed to be so independent and brave.
We must have known about her, like, when we lived there. But there's so many Markhams. There were so many. I could count like 10 people that I know with that last name, in Africa. But it's that's wild. All these ties. Look at Gayla and Elizabeth, all tied into Johnny there. Now, Gayla, I mean, look at this. This is kind of tied in too. Like, that was a no-no for women, right? You think back to your family. So, Gayla, what is a woman writer who? I should say, not what, who. This is a bunch of writers on the show, and I'm making grammatical mistakes right now. It is Champagne Sundays, but who do you want to give a toast to, Gayla?
Well, it's actually somebody that Johnny had introduced me to. She, because when I first approached Johnny with what I had found about my grandmother, I was hoping that he was going to that he was going to write it for me, because I wasn't a writer at the time. So I was just kind of confused. I knew there's a story, and he says, this is really your story. I'm like, damn, but I'm not a writer. But he says, well, I know a person that she's a writing coach. Maybe she can help you. So Davina Katulski, she's not only my friend, but she's a writer, also a writing coach. And kind of, Aaron, what you do with helping writers is just amazing, because I think about how do you teach somebody to write? It's so individualized, the whole process of kind of scraping your soul and finding out what you want to put onto paper. It's such a challenge, especially for us that just had never had that kind of formal training before. So I really do value that type of just support that the writing coaches give us. So shout out to all the writing coaches out there.
I agree with you. I second that. I need a writing coach, Linda, have you ever done that? Have you had a coach in your writing?
I haven't had a coach. My tip for beginning writers, or any writer really, is to journal and to go back, to journal, just open, just how you feel that day and why you feel that way, and then go back and read it years later, and you will see your themes. You'll see who you are. You'll see what's been troubling you over and over again. You'll see, I have all my life journaled and started journaling when I was a teenager in Alaska, where it was very isolated. I was 13 years, I was moved from California to Alaska when I was 13, and a little town of 2,000 people. And so I began journaling, because it was a very lonely time for me. And I just was a fish out of water. Although I had fun, I went inward, and I started reading a lot. And here's another woman who really influenced me. Her name is Simone de Beauvoir. She was a French woman, and she wrote a book called The Second Sex. Now, I don't know how a 13-year-old girl got a hold of this book, because there was no internet. The library, I don't know how I got this book. Honestly, I had of it time. And it's so molded my thinking and who I am today. And I want to say books are important. And my books and authors are friends. And, what can I say? When you're journaling, like I say, you will learn about yourself. So new writers, you want to learn who you are. You want to learn what's important to you, why it's important to you, because it has to be important to you, because it's a hard job. And if it's not important to you and real for you, you're not going to be able to finish.
Kayla, did you find any journals when you found the photos? Did you find any journals?
I found my grandmother had written a letter the night before she was to marry my grandfather. And that's what it was, more of a goodbye letter to her friends. So there was no journals per se, but there were some cards and letters, but not a journal per se. A lot of my discoveries were just through reading old newspapers back from the early 1900s. And kind of putting all the pieces together, and the faces that were there, and the pictures that my grandmother had saved for under the circumstances, like over almost 90 years. Those photos were hidden. So it was just really kind of doing that investigative type of looking at the past, reading the newspapers, understanding really what was going on politically, what was going on at the time, and what would have been like for me as a gay woman to be gay during that period of time. How would I have lived my life?
It's interesting. I just interviewed Andres Martinez. He's an illustrator, and he was talking about how in different ethnic groups that they have different spirits that are united. So in ancient times, this was all normal. And then something happened with civilization saying it wasn't. So I don't know what the heck happened. Like, come on, people, grow up. Because this has been there since ancient
We've always been
ancient
here.
times.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. We've always been here.
New. It's not like some water went on a gremlin and there's more, and then one did this and the other did that. It's not how it is.
I know, exactly.
I'm not comparing you all to gremlins. I'm just saying,
No, I understand that. Yeah, we didn't just decide 20 years ago that we wanted to write. We've been here for forever.
Yeah. I want to go over to you, Shirley, about this journaling side. Did you keep a journal like what Linda's talking about that helped you write the memoirs that you've written? Because I also know you've written some nonfiction to help students in success in learning, but did journaling ever help you?
No, I didn't bother with the journal. I went right into what I was writing. And one of the things, I have 5 memoirs, so it's from my own experience. But I was very, very taken living in Porterville with the problems that young Latinos have when they come here and they're illegal. And so I wrote a book called fall in love with an orange tree or a book. That title actually comes from something one of my former students was told. Her mother brought her to this country. She was legal. And she told her, she said, I have brought you to the best country in the world. Now you choose. Fall in love with an orange tree or a book. Meaning, work in the fields or get an education. Ooh. She did get an education. She was an award-winning teacher. And just a marvelous person. But I wanted, because I know the problems that my grandparents had as immigrants. And so I created a character named Elena, and everything in that book happened to somebody that I personally know. But the book, the main character is fictional, and she is in the United States. She is illegal. Her parents are taken away by uniformed men, and she's left to care for a brother and a sister, and try to go to school and get a job. Part of what this book became was there were a lot of people that liked it, and so this book right now is required reading in English classes at Menachie High School, where I taught for 25 years.
Wow.
Alma mater.
And recently, I went to speak to the students, and because they're into the age of videotaping everything, they videotaped the speech. And then my son called me and says, Mom, you're on YouTube. I said, what? And they put it on YouTube. So all you have to do is type in Shirley Hickman, and there I am on YouTube. And they
go, girl.
It's actually 2 classes, so I don't recommend you watch all of it. It will give you the idea of what was going on. And before I spoke about the book, I asked the teacher to ask the students to write down questions that they had. And then that's what I used to give the speech.
Oh,
but
that's
before
smart.
before I began the speech, I told them, I want to talk about you, not the book. I taught at this school, and I want to let you know that there are many, many students that I taught, and they're doing wonderful things. And I said, they weren't straight A students. They were always the best at what they did, but they had 2 characteristics. One is they knew how to work hard, and 2, they knew how to get along well with other people. And that's true.
I love that.
So, yeah.
Shirley,
so
I wanted to ask you. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
When you go on YouTube, you'll get the speech, but right next to it will be an interview that I did with Channel 24 about that book. And then next to that is about the first romance that I wrote called Sarah Darling, which takes place in the gold rush in California. And of course, that's fictional. So I have written 3 romance novels. At this point, I don't think I've got another novel in me, but I'm working on articles, and I write poetry a lot. I don't write it necessarily, some I have published, but mostly I write poetry to deal with my problems and my something that, if I'm anxious about something, get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, you write a poem, and then that takes care of the anxiety. But the last book that I've written, the most recent one, if you look at the cover, you'll see that there are all these hands. And the title of the book, is Dialogue in Shades of Brown. And I think it's important to know how that came about. I taught at Cal Poly in the English department during the civil rights movement and the war in Vietnam. And one of my students came often to speak to me. And this was the first time the word black was being used. So I picked up a pen and I said, why do you say you're black? This is black, you're not black. He picked up a piece of paper, white paper, and he said, this is white, you're not white either. So we put our hands together and we said, we're just shades of brown. And then we thought about it. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we thought of ourselves as one family, but different shades of brown?
Well, I love that. I got robbed at gunpoint in New Orleans, And then the gun went around. It was against my head, then went to Nancy, my mom, and then to my grandparents in the back seat. And then we ended up chasing the guy, which is crazy. But anyway, that's a whole other story.
Mm-hmm.
But the cops finally, I've got the cops to come and they go, well, is he chocolate black like me or is he licorice like him? And I'm looking at them going, what? So what you just said, it cracks me up. But on timing here, I do want to ask you, Shirley, what woman do you want to give a champagne toast to that is in the world of words?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What woman would you like to give a shout out
woman.
to or toast to?
No,
yeah, a woman.
Yes. Got it. Okay. 55 years ago, I taught a class at Porterville College called Creative Writing. And the people in there were wonderful. And we continued leaving the class and continuing the group. So it's still in existence today, down to 2 of us. But one of the people that I met there, named Marilyn Meredith. Marilyn is a role model in numerous ways. She had 5 children. Her husband served two deployments in Vietnam. She had a daycare center for adults who were developmentally disabled adults. And she writes 2 books a year. She's written 40 books altogether. They're mysteries. And she is a role model to me. Because, first of all, the kind of generous human being she is, the loving human being that she is, and the smart human being. And always encouraging writing. And whenever she would say something about my writing, it was like, and I'm sure a lot of you listening to this know what the feeling is. I never thought of that before, but oh my gosh, she's right. This is exactly what I need to do. And sometimes I would tell her about, all the sad things that were happening in my life and how stressed I was and I had all these things to do. She would listen patiently, sometimes give me advice, and then she would say, and what have you written? So Marilyn Meredith, to me, is a role model, not only as a writer, but also as a woman, as a human being, and I dearly love her. She's in her mid-90s now.
Wow. And that's a piece of advice too for when we talk about advice for writers and for women getting started or young girls, because a lot of times it starts when we're teenagers, right? I want to go over to Elizabeth Massey. Who inspires you as a woman writer?
Well, I'm going to make this quick, and I hope it's okay. I'll do 3 really fast.
You go, girl. You can do whatever you want. None of them put any spooky things
none of
in my
them I have ever met. I haven't met any of them. But the first one I would say would be Shirley Jackson, of course, because she wrote some of the scariest stuff ever, but she also wrote some of the funniest stuff ever. I don't know if you've ever read Life Among the Savages by her. It is so funny. It's just a family comedy. They had to move from an apartment out to the country and how the family adjusted or didn't adjust. And so she shows that you can go from one genre to another and not skip a beat. And I really appreciate that. And then second would be Fannie Flagg, who is able to create some of what seems like very simple, ordinary stories, but the characters are so deep and so engaging that I've read, I think I've read all of her books. And last but not least, Harper Lee. To Kill a Mockingbird is absolutely brilliant. I don't think she ever wanted Go Set a Watchman to come out. I'm sorry that it did, but To Kill a Mockingbird will, live on as such an encapsulation of that time period and just, through a child's eyes, which gives it an innocence that makes it absolutely powerful. And all of these have inspired me in my work.
I love that. I love really that. We cannot forget her at all. I'm so glad you brought her up. I want to go to Erin. Who do you want to give a shout out to? Or a toast, a champagne toast?
A champagne toast was actually perfect for this person because it's Eve Babbitt's. And if you're unfamiliar, she's an LA author that did a mixture of fiction and nonfiction. So she would talk about parts of her life, but then add fictionalized parts. And she brings LA into it as its own character, and I just love her tongue-in-cheek style of writing. I find her very amusing, and I feel that her stories are a great time capsule of the time periods that she wrote at in the 50s and the 60s in Los Angeles. I would also like to say S.E. Hinton, because she was 16 years old when she wrote The Outsiders. And yes, and I think that book is still taught and it's still amazing. And it's also this other little perfect historic time capsule of how people felt at the time period that it came out, and just such a wonderful way to experience history. And then just she was 16 years old. That's so amazing. So
I think and also we're so when we're that age, we're like unstoppable, and we know it was stubborn, we know it all, and yet we don't have that filter to stop ourselves, which I think good art comes from that. Some of the best punk bands come from when they were 16 years old and stuff, it's like it just, as we age, sometimes we put limits on ourselves and with writing, it's in the arts, it allows us to go further, and we shouldn't put those limits on ourselves. Yes, there's editing later, but don't limit in creativity. Stop it.
Absolutely.
That's my limit, is don't put a limit, Johnny, do you have a woman writer that you want to give a shout out to?
I would like to toast to Shirley, because education is so important, and it was such a foundation in my life. And I think it's going to become incumbent upon parents to get more involved as education funding is cut. And she wrote a marvelous book called School Success, 500 Ways Busy Parents Can Help Their Children Succeed in School. And I just think, she's always throughout her career been so focused on helping students learn and thrive and make a difference in the world. And so many of her former students have done that. And so I know that these 500 tips are things that would really be helpful to people. And so I just, want to toast to her for writing that book and for all that she's done for, and that's a common theme among all of our guests today is the willingness to help other people and support each other and learn from each other. And, there's some ways each of us is ahead of the other and vice versa. And so we all can learn from each other's strengths. And I think that's a beautiful thing about everyone here.
I agree. I have, women authors, teachers, they're, sometimes a book can be your teacher if you're not getting the education you need, depending on where. I grew up reading MMK, Mary Margaret Molly Kay. She was a British writer, and the Far Pavilions, the Trade Winds, it was just this love affair of India, that I had as a girl growing up. But I also read a lot of Pearl S. Buck, if you've read her novels, known for The Good Earth. But I'm going to go to Barbara Kingsolver. The Poisonwood Bible really connected for me because of living in Kenya as a kid and being immersed in the cultures, like literally living with the different cultures and the different tribes. And I remember the first, chapter going with, the spiritual beliefs, and then the people moving over to the Congo and arguing over how to grow crops. And I'm like, so wrong. Let the Africans, they know how to grow the crops. They know. And I grew the crops that way too. We did it. We all grew crops, we all had gardens. The Poisonwood Bible, but she also lived in Tucson, Arizona, where we did, and in the Appalachian area. I think Elizabeth, she might be a neighbor of yours. Because she does live up in Virginia now. So she kind of connects with three regions that mean a lot to me is Appalachia region.
I'm in the Shenandoah Valley. Yeah.
Yeah, she's near you. Yeah, she's near you. Tucson, Arizona is like Africa to me too. And so it's like all little bits of Africa, but her writing, Barbara Kingsolver, is incredible. She understands how to connect the landscape and the earth with the people and actually the culture, the I don't know, and still the day-to-day lifestyle of someone. It's like figurative writing. I don't know how to explain that. But Barbara Kingsolver, I definitely have to give a shout out to her. But we're going to move on a little bit. We're going to run around the room real quick, see if we have any more advice for those writing. And then we're going to close the show with Glenn Burrows and Sharon Kurtz. But Erin, any tips that you want to give out since you work with writers on, jumping in and going for it?
2 tips. Just write.
Yeah.
Don't try to write a first draft that you think is going to be a final draft, because it's not, and that's okay. And community. It's important to have people to bounce ideas off and to get feedback from, and critiques don't mean that you're a bad writer. They're just there to help you strengthen your writing.
All right, Elizabeth, from you?
Yeah, I've taught quite a few creative writing workshops from grades 3 all the way through the university. And what works best with the young people, especially in the elementary grades, if, they seem a little daunted when you say, we're going to work on writing a story. And they, some of them are excited and some eyes just glaze over like, oh no. But I say, look at it this way. I said, when you think about a story and you break it down to its very, very simplest, it's basically a problem and a solution or an attempted solution. And then everything else grows around it. You got to have a problem, and then the person's either going to solve it or try to solve it. And then you fill in all the blanks. You fill in the other characters, and you fill it. We start out by an activity that is brainstorm all the ways to get a cat out of a tree. And they do. And they say, okay, you said you're going to call the fire department and get the cat out. I said, basically, that's the story. You have a problem, the cat's in the tree, you got a solution, the fire trucks come. Now, it's not
I hope
story.
the firemen and women, for Gayla, she wants the women. I want the firemen to be cute. Gayla, you want firewomen to be cute too.
See,
come on.
You're already fleshing out the story. And you add characters. You have a neighbor next door who goes, "Better get that cat out of the tree. I'm sick of listening to it." And then you start filling in the blanks. So start with a problem.
No, kill the neighbor. Kill the neighbor off already. Kill the neighbor off.
But anyway, and that every single young kid in the workshops gets into it. I have not had a failure yet, and it really, really helps. And the kids who didn't think they could write find out they can come up with something, and it's a nice, creative little spark in their brains. And so that would be my advice, is to, if you have to, just break it down to the fact that this is basically what I'm doing, and let me fill out the blanks. Thank you.
I love it. I want to go to you, Gayla. Any tips? Because you got started, you just like this, you just ended up doing it. You did it.
Yeah, well, it was about a 12-year process from deciding to write the book to finishing it. So it was not a quick process, but my biggest advice is just get rid of the notion that you're too old to start. Because a lot of people thought I'm too old to start something new. I've been in banking for 35 years, so I'm just too old. I can't do it. I think that was my biggest obstacle as far as just getting to the finishing line, is just getting rid of that notion that I couldn't do it. So wherever you are in your life journey, it is just a matter of starting something new and taking it piece by piece. And also finding the right group. I agree 100% with Erin that, I got involved with a writing group, even though they were part of the Sisters in Crime Los Angeles.
Oh yeah, cool.
I learned a lot from them. Yeah, so because I couldn't find anywhere a hysterical fiction, creative nonfiction group anywhere in Los Angeles. So it really was about just finding people that I could, talk to, and they would share their experiences, and we critique, and I was critiquing their crime fiction, crime novels, and they were critiquing mine, and we learned so much from each other by just, don't worry about being in the box so much. Just go out there and find the right writers that you can connect with, and share the experiences, and it does keep you honest as far as getting with a critique group that will keep you going. It keeps you writing, and it keeps you active with the writing process. That was really the one thing came out of it is just being able to kind of set that goal of like, okay, well, I have to get my pages turned in by next week, so I better start tracking on this. And it was a good way to keep honest and kind of keep myself in the chair when I would kind of otherwise think, oh, I should be out, doing something else. No, I have to stay home and write my pages. So
that's
that would be
important.
my biggest advice. Yeah,
that's important because it's such a solitary craft, and
it is.
You can slough it off all the time. Yeah, it's so easy to just go, oh, I'm going to do this instead, and then you never get done your passion project. Shirley, what about you? Do you have any tips? I know you do.
Well, when someone says to me, I want to be a writer, I have sort of a simplistic thing to say. Writers are people who write.
Mm-hmm.
They don't talk about it. They don't dream about it. They write. They actually write. And don't expect the writing to be very good, because it's not going to be. Mm-hmm. But I echo what a previous person said, that importance of having somebody to read your writing and to comment about it. And our writing group, 55 years in existence, is only 2 of us now. It's a former student of mine, Brent Gill, who has written 3 wonderful books and working on a 4th one now. And we meet every Wednesday night and we go over our writing. I think that is so valuable. But in order to do that, you have to be open to criticism, open to looking at it in a different way. And I find it very, very valuable. Brent and I are 10 years apart, but I'm in my 80s and he's in his 70s, so we're contemporaries now. But yeah, a writer is somebody who writes.
Yeah.
And
you have to leave it at the door. I was going to say, you have to leave your ego at the door. And that's the same in music, Johnny, right? When you write a song, and isn't that the same? I mean, you got some advice for songwriters, women songwriters, right? Would be, you kind of have to, I know that from being in the music world and even in the publishing article writing world, when someone has something to share with you, listen, and you can take the advice or not, but you have to leave that ego out. And, you need your ego though.
Yeah. For me, it was finding people that I trusted and that I was on the same page with. Everyone has so many different opinions about music and about literature, and they're all valid. I mean, there's plenty of music that has millions of streams that I don't relate to. Sorry, I have a frog in my throat. I apologize. But so it's finding the people that are kind of the same kind of creator, I guess. And then I think it's not censoring yourself. Let whatever comes out come out, and then you can fine tune it later. But initially, it's always stream of consciousness for me. And Shirley, you talked about getting up at 3. For me, it's around 3:30. A lot of my best songs come to me around that time, and it's stream of consciousness. I just let it go. And then you go back and you can fine tune everything. And also just paying attention, as I go about my life, if a thought comes to me that I have a powerful emotion to, I pay attention to that. And I have an app on my phone where I can just record something really quick. So a lyric will come to me, or else I'll jot something down, or if it's a melodic idea, I'll sing it into to the recording app on my phone. And it's paying attention to the things that pique your interest, because that's where it comes from you, and it comes and it's things that are important to you, and that's where my best songs come from. And I think that it's really important to always pay attention to what you're feeling and thinking.
Yeah, I love this. I love all your advice. In closing, Linda, did you have any more advice? Because I know you talked about journaling.
Yes. Well, I have been writing for my life, all my life, writing for my life, because this is how I've worked out situations in my life, and for instance, The Cowgirl Jumped Over the Moon is a new adult novel, contemporary. I wrote it because I was a horse person and I got injured and I had to lose my love. And this was my way of doing everything I ever wanted to do in the horse world, getting it out of me and being able to move on in life. So my writing has been my way of dealing with life in so many circumstances. And yes, taking the first step is the most important thing. Starting a project is the most important thing, not just thinking about it, starting putting it on paper. But I did get an education along the way. I do have a degree in English literature. I have joined, been parts of many writers groups, and I've gotten, and books are my friends. If you're a writer, you're a reader, and I just got my books to read list today. I got enough books to keep me busy for about, 6 months. Anyway, I love writing. I love sharing my work. I love being in the writing world. And so to young writers, people who want to be writers, I say, writers write, surgeons cut, be a writer.
I love this. This has been such a fun show. All of you have brought such great advice and great stories to the table, and for people to read. That's the best thing, and to listen to with Johnny's music as well. So everyone, I want to thank everyone for joining us. I'm going to go through. Erin's website is asyounglessauthor.com. She's youngless, and she's young. She's going to stay the same age for her whole life. I'm just kidding. But also genealogybyErin.com. Everyone's links are in the episode notes. Linda Ballou, you can go to lindaballauauthor.com and lostangeladventures.com. For Elizabeth Massey, and that is Massie, go to amazon.com. Gayla Turner, go to gaylaturner.com. And then also Shirley Skufka Hickman, go to amazon.com. Everything's linked in the episode notes. And of course, for Johnny Schaefer, go to hearjohnny.com. We're going to move on to our segments with Glenn Burrows and Sharon Kurtz. Thank you all so much for joining us. And Johnny, thank you for bringing awesome authors onto the show.
Thanks, Lisa.
Absolutely.
It was great.
Thank you very much.
You guys.
This was great.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Johnny. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, we can't talk about famous authors and women authors without going to Glenn over in England, owner of Norfolk Tours, and you can go to norfolk-tours.co.uk because there's no way he's not going to say something about Anna Sewell. Well, you've got some other ladies that are famous over in England too, but isn't Anna, wasn't she near you in Norfolk?
Yes, indeed. She was born in Great Yarmouth, which is one of our nice coastal resorts. And she was born in a tiny little cottage, which is actually still there. So that's a nice little place to visit.
Oh, so can we actually go to where she was?
Yes, yeah. I mean, up until last year, it was a little cafe, and they actually did nice cheese scones. But apart from that, I think it's now going to be turned into a library, surprisingly enough. With lots of Anna Sewell stuff in it. So that should be good.
So Anna Sewell, tell everybody what she wrote because it's very famous. Well, to me it is.
She wrote Black Beauty, which is one of the best books for children, especially, and adults as well, obviously, to learn about cruelty to animals, because she wrote it from the view of a horse. And that was quite revolutionary at the time. I mean, she was writing this in the 1870s, and she was writing a book all about horses because there was a cruel bit that they used to use to lead horses, and she didn't like it. So actually she wrote this book, and she was one of the biggest influences on the RSPCA to get this bit outlawed. So it done a lot of good, and it also opened people's minds about cruelty to animals in general, because, like I say, this actually came from the horse's mouth, so to speak, because the horse was the one telling the story. So it was really revolutionary.
And she wrote My Friend Flicka, which is also one of my favorites. My Friend Flicka. Yeah.
I didn't know that. I'll have to look that one up.
Uh-oh. I'm going to have to double check myself
I
now,
was
aren't
going
I?
to say, I don't know about
Uh-oh.
that.
I thought she did.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm now writing it down.
Uh-oh.
I don't think she did. You'll have to check that one.
No, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. That
Yeah, I
was
didn't
written
think.
by Mary O'Hara.
Oh, well, there you go. You see, oh dear, oh dear.
Oh dear, smack on the knuckles. It's a
I
good
should
thing I'm
think so.
not in convent anymore.
Well, you see, at the end of the day, we all make mistakes, even you.
Oh, apparently really, it's like, how many can I make in a day? It's like a contest. Well, Glenn, thank you so much for giving a shout out to Anna Sewell, everyone, Black Beauty, and not My Friend Flicka, but I do encourage you to read My Friend Flicka as well.
Yeah, indeed. Bye.
All right, so we were still talking about women and women authors, and Sharon Kurtz, who's a travel writer, so she knows about writing, and she's a photographer, is here to tell us about one of her favorite authors. And from what she's told me, this woman is someone to really cherish what she's done in life. So who is this lady, Sharon? How are you?
Hi, thank you. I'm good, Lisa. I want to talk about Sue Monk Kidd. She is the best author. She was born in the late 40s in Georgia, and she's a celebrated American author known for exploring themes like race, feminism, and religion in the South. And her famous book for me, the one that brought me to her, is The Secret Life of Bees. It was about 20 years ago. Delves into the complexities of race and family in 1960s South Carolina.
Oh, wow. And bees.
And bees. So they did make a movie of it. That's what people might remember most. It featured Queen Latifah and Jennifer Hudson, and the young girl in the story is Dakota Fanning. So she lost her mother. It's in the 60s. She had a bad home life, and she had a nanny, which was the Jennifer Hudson character or housekeeper, who took her to this, for safety, this family of beekeepers, Black women that were beekeepers, and they taught her about life and about love and self-discovery and deep bonds that she can form between people because she had such an unfortunate family life. So it was really, really touching.
And also about bees, because they've got the matriarch, the queen bee. So it's really interesting. And I just learned this about bees, about female bees. So, they mate, right? But the female bee, if she didn't like her mate, she can eject the sperm so that it doesn't actually go. She's like, I don't like you, and ejects it so that there's no baby bees made from him. How about that? Did you know that about bees?
I did not know that.
I learned about that from Isabella Rossellini, because she's a farmer and a beekeeper. And she was on a show, and I was listening to, not our show, that maybe we'll call her up. Because she's written books too. But she's a beekeeper, and she talks about how bees taught her things about womanhood and feminism and strength, inner strength. And, we can all be our queen bees. So yeah, that's interesting.
Just talking about her again in that book, I want to read it again. Do you ever do that? Read a book after decades, maybe, and you see it, you read it with all new appreciation.
Yeah, because we grow as individuals, and you'll go back, as you're reading, you're like, oh, I've read this before. It's like when you've watched a movie and you didn't think you'd watched it. It'll be changed a little bit, but books are so great because you're co-creating with the author. The author's given you the platform and the tree, right? But we're putting that life in as we read it, because it's our visuals as we read it, so it'd be interesting to reread. I've done that a lot, especially because I read as a teenager and preteen. I would read like 2 to 3 books a day, like insane, voracious reader. and of course didn't understand what I was reading because I was reading like War and Peace and Leon Uris and MMK and Taylor Caldwell and all of these heavy historical fiction books, which I loved. And there were things in it that I'm like, well, I don't know what they're doing. And, then, I grew up and found out what they were doing. They were playing bees.
Yeah, wow.
The birds and the bees. But I think that's great that you want to go back and read her. So did you find out about her from the movie or, how did you
No,
find out
I
about
read
her?
the book first, and then it was because the book came out in the early 2000s, and then the movie came out just a few years later. But what I like about her now, as I'm older than I was then, is that she writes. I have my ears out for people who write about women and aging, and we are all approaching a new frontier. We don't know what it's like to age, and how do we feel about it? And she writes about aging as not a decline, but an opportunity for renewal and deep self-awareness, encouraging women to embrace and evolve themselves with grace and courage. So,
Ooh, I like that. Grace and courage. They do go hand in hand, right? Yeah. It's just a new, I like that about the renewal because it's just a different part of our lives now. It's
you're
not,
still yourself like you always were, but now you're just learning new things about yourself or exploring deeper than you had before.
I love that. I love that. See what books do and authors do for us in life.
It
I
is
love
true.
that. Well, thank you so much, Sharon. Now we're all going to have to go check her out. So everyone go to SharonKkurtz.com to keep up with Sharon's adventures around the world. She also has a podcast with us every first Wednesday at noon Central Time, where she takes us around the world and across the country on her adventures. So thanks so much, and we'll see or talk to you soon.
Thank you. I loved it, and I'll see you next time.
Happy reading.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio. Keep up with our shows at bigblendradio.com.